Macro Detectors is the fastest growing manufacturer in the industry, and for good reason. Many detectorists, including Mike Hare, call us the most innovative, but we are so much more than that. We listen to and care about our customers. We also offer a wide range of detectors to fit all of your needs. Come check out all of our products today at www.noctadetectors.com. Detectors for everyone, everywhere, a lifetime.
Welcome to the All Metal Mode podcast with your host, Michael Hare. Tune in every Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern with co-host Gypsy Jules, and every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern with Matt Hoffman as we talk to guests, discuss metal detectors, equipment, and everything treasure related. Feel free to join in the discussion in the chat room during the show, and please, if you like what you hear, we'd appreciate you taking a moment, hit that like button, and share the link with your friends. We hope you enjoy the show. The All Metal Mode podcast starts right now.
Hello, everybody. This is Mike Hare, and you're listening to the All Metal Mode podcast. Tonight, we're going to have Dorian Cook on, doing Biblical Archeology Part 2. That should be really interesting. I thought we covered it really good, and I was talking to Dorian recently. We were supposed to do it last week, and we had some issues, but Dorian's really excited to do this. He's got quite a bit more on it, so it ought to be a really good show. Gypsy won't be joining us tonight. She's getting ready for a trip, and I called her today and I said, hey, if you're going to miss a show, we've got Dorian on, and you know how Dorian gets into, we just sit back and listen. So if you got anything, you need to do or whatever, you could take the night off. I said, of course, if you want to join us, we'd love it. And she said, Mike, I'm getting ready for a trip, and that gave me more time to pack. So she said, I'd like to do that. So yeah, Gypsy took the night off on us, and But you know how it is. Dorian will keep the show going. You can find us on Facebook at All Metal Mode, as well as All Metal Mode Podcast UK. All Metal Mode is every Monday and Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and All Metal Mode UK is every Thursday at 8 p.m. GMT time or 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Although the show usually runs twice a week, tomorrow night we're going to be off. Steph has to work late, and I will be with Randy. So tomorrow we're going to take off. I don't think anybody wants to hear Randy hollering and screaming in the background, beating on me. He's a little demon, I'm telling you. If you're interested in reading any of my reviews or metal detecting articles, you can find them at allmetalmode.com. Click on articles up across the top, and you'll see all my latest articles. I just did I had fun with it. First time I ever did it. My good friend Donnie, I sent him the 6MXI, and he really kind of with it this spring, and had a really good time. So we kind of did an article, was like question and answers, and turned out good. Don't forget Dirt Digest magazine. Of course, there's a new issue just come out last week. I am not sure what the 6MXI C-Scope 6MXI review is in there for me, and honestly, I haven't even read the magazine yet. I usually read it the first day, and I'm kind of waiting. I read through it, and then I'm like, oh man, I gotta wait a month. But DirtDigestMagazine.com, check them out. Great thing. Love it. Events, if you have any events, please let us know. We'd be happy to announce them. Please help us spread the word about the podcast. We'd really appreciate it. And we'll give you a shout out. Let us know, and we'll give you a shout out on the show. And if you got a YouTube channel or whatever. So again, tonight it is Dorian Cook, and I'm really looking forward to this. We might have some better audio going on. We downloaded Skype earlier, and so far testing out really good. So, Dorian, how you doing?
Oh, doing good, Mike. Thanks.
Good. So you've been really, when I bring this up, you've been really excited. So like I said, I'm really, really curious how tonight's going, because I thought we covered so much, and for you to have more on it and excited about it really has me excited. Hey, before we get started, though, why don't you tell everybody about your books and how to get them?
The books, I have 3 books on the Civil War in Kentucky. They cover the biggest and most of the important battles, and also they cover the famous Confederate raider John Morgan. One of them does. And I have 2 books on Kentucky's pioneer and Indian Wars history, which ran from about 1760 to a little after 1800, just barely after 1800. The Daniel Boone period, you might call it. Picked out a lot of unusual stories that are not very well known to most people, and they involve unsung heroes, as I call them, men that should have gotten a lot more press than they ever did for the deeds that they committed on the frontier. Most people don't know it, but at one time, Mike, there were only 100. The Shawnee Indians and their allies had destroyed all of the settlements in Kentucky except 2, Boonesboro and Harrodsburg, and there was only a total of 127 defenders left against over 3,000 Shawnees, and they held out. And so these stories, the amazing ways they did it, are documented, detailed in these books. The books right now are in, I won't say mass publication. I have chosen to self-publish because by the time you get a publisher, and by the time they get done with you, you actually get pennies, on a $25, $30 book. You don't get much at all. So I've self-published, and I'm still trying to decide how to market them. Right now, they're available by contacting me at my email address, which is dcla@earthlink.net. That's lowercase letters. And I can give you details on how to purchase the books if you're interested. They do have a lot of leads in them for people who like to metal detect. I went ahead and put a lot of things in there that I realize I'm never going to get to. At 71, I've only got so much time left to chase treasures and metal detect, and I realize I've got too many leads to ever be able to do them all. So I'm starting to release them in my books, and I hope some of you out there can take advantage of it.
Nice. Bill Marsh just joined us in chat. He joined late. He is fired. You are fired, Bill. Just kidding. Bill, I was worried. He wasn't in, and Bill's usually the first one in. I thought, oh boy, where's Bill at? Glad to see you in, Bill. So, Dorian, let's go ahead and get started if you're ready. And
okay. What I'd like to do is going to be pretty different from the first part. I have several goals I want to accomplish. I want to give you a real taste, give the listeners a real taste of what it means to be a history detective, how to go about it. It's something that if you ever watch the TV cop shows, you know how the policemen start out as patrolmen, and then hopefully in time they get their gold shield and they become detectives. And once they become a detective, they're a rookie detective, and they have to learn from the guys who've been there forever on how to solve cases. You've got somebody's been killed. Nobody knows who did it. Their job is to discover who did it and bring them to justice. Well, history detectives try to discover why certain events in history are a mystery, and to discover and turn up previously unknown documentation of them and details about them. So we go beyond. You start out in metal detecting, you start out as a researcher. You research out a site. I remember researching out battlefields. I found my first lost battlefield in 1977 was the battlefield of Big Hill, Kentucky. I was the first one to locate it. And that was a thrill. And I was all excited about having researched this out and having tracked it down. And yes, there's a little bit of detective work in that. But the point was, when I found it, I just went after all the relics I could dig. Now, were I to find a lost battlefield and I dig those relics, I want to know who lost them. I want to know which units, which army. I want to know everything I can about why those relics are in that spot as opposed to 100 yards away. What happened here? Is this where the cannons were set up? One of my group members, Mark Bradley, is doing a great job up on the Drew Mountain battlefield in West Virginia. He's finding an area of what we call friction primers. These were used to fire the Civil War cannons, and the ones he's finding have been fired. So that means that right where he found those, there was previously unknown battery. There was guns, Civil War guns set up there as part of the battle, and it's not recorded in the official account of the battle that there were any guns there. So Mark has now, as you see, unraveling a previously unknown piece of the history of that battle. And that's what we want to do tonight. Only we're going to be talking biblical archaeology. So we're going to be using the Bible as a history book. We're going to see if it's reliable, and we're going to see if it can provide us enough clues to do two things. We're going to seek out the exact location, and I mean the exact location, of where the crucifixion of Christ took place, and exactly where he was buried for 3 days and 3 nights. We're going to follow 12 clues in the Bible, and we're going to look at sites all around Jerusalem to see if these sites match the clues that the Bible gives us. I doubt any of you have ever done this, so I think it's going to be a very interesting experience for everybody. So we'll go ahead and get started.
All right.
And I want to begin by telling you that archaeologists and historians have proposed at least 16 different sites in Jerusalem where these two events could have taken place. But when you start to examine these claims, I think it's only fair to say that many of these historians and archaeologists are not religious people. Many of them are atheists, many of them are agnostic, or they're Jewish, and they have, frankly, a bias towards Christ. So you end up with all of these sites proposed, and they haven't gone to the Bible to locate the clues we're going to be looking at, and they end up basically just speculating on places that are ridiculous when you actually look at these clues. So out of the 16 different major sites that have been suggested, only 2 of them have any real merit at all as candidates for the sites of these 2 events. So we're going to look at these 2, and we're going to compare them, and we're going to follow the 12 clues, and we're going to see if we can clearly come to a conclusion about which of these 2 sites was almost certainly where these events took place. So if we're all ready to get started here, let me, okay, I'm working off of notes I have in a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm advancing my slides here. I think I went too far. I just realized I depend on numbers on these slides. Oh, here it is. Okay. I found my number thing on my laptop here. Folks, I will be at the right place in just a second here.
No, we're good. No rush. We'll get there.
Okay. All right. Yeah. We are there. All right, we're going to start with clue number one. And this one actually doesn't come from the Bible, but it's tied very much to biblical history. Jewish religious writings clearly reveal that Jewish law forbade the execution of criminals inside the city walls of Jerusalem. So the crucifixion would have had to have taken place outside the city limits as they were located at that time. Now, the two places that we're going to be focusing on, one of them is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and the other will be what's called Gordon's Calvary or the Garden Tomb, or Golgotha is another name. And we're going to compare these two on these clues. As it turns out, both of these places were outside the city at the time of Jesus' crucifixion. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre now sits inside the present city walls of Old Jerusalem because there was a valley called the Valley of Hinnom, and it was filled in over the years. And so the wall was extended out farther and buildings were built inside, and we end up with this large church structure. And inside it is it's like a building within a building that they claim is the tomb of Jesus Christ. So the first clue doesn't tell us or give us any indication of which one of these two could be the correct place. But we're going to continue on to clue number two. And we're going to go into the scripture and read where this clue is found. Matthew 27, verse 31, if anybody wants to follow along in their Bibles. And after they had mocked him, they took the robe off from him and put his own raiment or garment on him and led him away to crucify him. Where did they lead him away to? Well, that's what we want to find out. But what I'm going to propose to you is that they didn't just go out. The Romans soldier who was in charge, it would have been the equivalent of a sergeant in our army probably. They troop out of the city. All these people following, and of course Jesus was carrying the post of his cross. I don't think the crossbar was on it. Looking and studying Roman customs for crucifixions, because the post alone, I'm going to propose to you now and try to show you later the proof, was 10 inches, about 9 to 10 inches square and about probably 10 feet long, somewhere in that area. It was a very heavy piece, and the person who had to bear that would be on one end and dragging the other end on the ground. And of course, Jesus had gone through what's called a Roman scourging, and that Roman scourging is not like you see in the Western movies where the guy, takes a black snake whip and puts a few lashes across somebody's back. The Roman scourging had the man who would do the scourging was called a lictor, Licchtor, and he was a professional, and he had a whip that basically had 8 or 9 leather straps on it, and at the end of each one of these straps was set a piece of bone or metal. And when they scourged a person with it, it ripped the flesh off of them. The scripture says that Christ's bones were exposed. He was a bloody mess when they got done with him, and he left a trail of blood all the way to his crucifixion site, and that's why he was so weak that he could not bear that big stake all the way to the crucifixion. So this is what the Romans did commonly. This can be verified historically. Obviously, I don't have the time, to take you through every little detail and prove it to you, but you can research this out for yourself, and you'll see that I'm telling you the truth on this. Now, here's the thing: history would suggest to us that this Roman in charge of the crucifixion just picked a site. Well, let's go up here on top of that hill and let's just, dig a hole and let's crucify him right there. That's not the way the Romans worked, people. Anybody who studies the Romans, they were notoriously efficient. Everything was planned carefully. Nothing was done by chance. You can go to the do a little research on the Jewish fortress of Masada and bring up the pictures of the Roman camps that are still in existence around the base of the mountain that they besieged for 2 years. And look at them. They are perfectly square with hand-stacked rock walls around each camp. Everything is organized to the smallest degree. Well, you can believe that they had a regular crucifixion site that they used because Christ was by far not the only person they crucified. That was the means of public execution that the Romans used. It was done to intimidate the population into obeying the law. All crucifixions were public matters, and the Romans picked the site we're going to see very carefully. But in clue number 2 here, we're looking for an already existing Roman crucifixion site. And I know there are people emotionally who want that crucifixion site to be right on top of Golgotha. The problem is, people, I have been there. I have seen it. I've got pictures to back it up. There's no soil on top of Golgotha. It's solid rock. I mean, I say no soil. There's a very, very small amount of soil. You might dig 2 or 3 inches before you hit solid rock. They didn't have time to bring in somebody with a chisel and hammer and slowly chisel out a hole where they could do 3 crosses and 3 crucifixions because the 2 thieves that were crucified with him. So they had to go to a site that was already prepared and used regularly whenever a public execution was needed. I'm looking at the pictures of the Roman camps in Masada in my PowerPoint presentation here, and they, like I said, when you see these, you'll see immediately how organized the Romans were and everything they did. Now, inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, they have a spatial area where they have built rails and things around this earthquake crevice. This crevice appears to be about maybe a foot deep and about 6-8 inches wide. And I'll guarantee you, they say, the people, and I should back up just a moment. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is administered by 6 different religious organizations, one of the main ones being the Catholic Church. The Eastern Orthodox is the same. It's a real ecumenical thing there. And I was told by an Israeli security officer that apparently all of these different religious leaders that administer this site don't always get along, and they get into pushing and shoving matches, and Israeli security has to go in and break them up. So all is not harmony and peace.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, anyway, if you bring this earthquake crack up and see this spot where they say held Christ's stake, it would have had to have 3 or 4 braces nailed to the stake, coming out at 45-degree angles in different directions to hold it upright. It would have been a real haphazard mess to have tried to crucify anybody in this earthquake crevice here. And there's another problem that they forgot to take care of. There were 2 others that were crucified at the same time, and they don't show any other earthquake cracks where these 2 crosses of the 2 thieves could have been. So this clue we have to rule in favor, as we're going to see, of the Garden Tomb or the Golgotha site. Now, I haven't given you any proof yet on that. That's going to come into play. The Roman crucifixion site, I ask you to just table that now, because we're going to have to look at some other clues, and then I'm going to bring this Roman crucifixion site that I know is at Golgotha I'm going to bring that in and show you where it is. And I was part of the team that helped excavate it. So I'm in a good position here to give you some very, very almost unknown information. All right. Our next clue was that the Bible says that he was crucified at a place that was called the place of the skull. The place of the skull. Well, the Catholics said that when they built the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, they found skulls, plural. Bible says this place was called the place of a skull, not the place of skulls. So in researching, I discovered that the Church of the Holy Sepulchre has been built on a place that the Bible calls Tophet, Tophet, if you want to research it. Tophet was notorious. It's set on the edge of the Valley of Hinnom, and it was there that when the Israelites were badly departing from God and following pagan practices and religions, they set up a giant metal idol to the owl god Molech, and they sacrificed their firstborn children by passing them into the fire as like a big basin full of fire in Molech's feet, and they burned their children alive in that fire. This is how badly they had become corrupted in their thinking. And so the skulls that were found at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre site at Tophet were the skulls of the infants that died there. But at Gordon's Calvary, and the reason it's called Gordon's Calvary, there was a British general, James China Gordon. China was his nickname. He'd served over in that area with the army. He found a tomb, and just not far from it, a cliff face that looked like a skull. Now, if you look at that skull face or that cliff face today, it's been damaged by artillery fire in modern wars. But if you go back and do a search, type in, images of Golgotha or 1800s images of Golgotha, and you'll get an 1880s picture of the skull face on the cliff, and it is awesome. It is so clearly a skull face. So much better defined than it is now. So it's definitely, the place of a skull.
Interesting.
Yeah, now when you talk about Golgotha, Golgotha is a part of Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah is a long ridge. At its southern end, it was where the first temple, or the Temple of Solomon, stood. But on the north edge of the old city of Jerusalem, they had a problem. I think I mentioned this last time, but let's do a little review on this. They had a problem with enemies attacking along the top of this ridge and getting over the 25-foot wall and getting into the city of Jerusalem. And so they cut out a big chunk of Mount Moriah. They quarried it because basically once you get through this very, very thin layer of soil, it's solid rock. And so they quarried out a huge section there. And in the process, they formed these vertical walls, which is called the escarpment of Golgotha. And it is in this vertical wall, or one of these vertical walls, that the skull face was formed, not intentionally, but simply by the fact they broke into caves and cavities in the natural limestone. Mount Moriah is honeycombed with natural and man-made caves and rooms and tunnels. It is a place of incredible secrets, many of them yet to be revealed. I've been privileged to learn a few, and I have been utterly stunned and amazed at what all has gone on biblically on Mount Moriah and inside Mount Moriah. So we definitely have a much better representation of the place of a skull, as the scripture says, at Gordon's Calvary or Golgotha. Now, around the corner, if you're looking at the skull face, and you go left about 200 feet, there's a right angle turn in the escarpment wall, and you follow it back, and you will, in about 200 to 300 feet, about the length of a football field, you will come to the Garden Tomb. So the place of a skull is very near what is known commonly as the Garden Tomb. And we'll get into that a little more here shortly. Right now, I need to go ahead and go to clue number 4 here. Hang on while I...
Hey, Dorian, real quick, I'm sorry. While you're doing that, I've got a question. You said you have slides. Can these be found on your Facebook page?
They are not on the Facebook page. This presentation, which I give to church groups, is called The Secrets of the Garden Tomb and Golgotha. And there's 417 slides in it. Most of those are pictures.
Okay.
Most of them that I took over there in Jerusalem and in Israel.
Okay.
And for anybody that might be interested, these presentations I give are free. I give them to any church group that requests them. If I have to travel more than 100 miles, I ask basically for my expenses, for whatever gas costs or whatever it costs me to come. Somebody, here I am in Kentucky, if somebody wants me to come to California, they're going to have to cover my expenses. I do this nonprofit. I'm not trying to make money on it. I'm just trying to share what the amazing things that I was privileged to be part of the discovery of.
That's great. That's awesome that you do that.
Okay, we come to clue number 4. And you're going to be amazed at this one. I was. This is found in Luke 23, verse 38. And a superscription also was written over him, and basically means a message, was written over him in letters of Greek and Latin and Hebrew. This is the King of the Jews. Now, I bet everybody here has seen the Catholic representation of this, where you have a figure of Christ nailed to the cross, and up above his head on the cross post is a little bitty sign. And this supposedly is written in 3 languages, and everybody thinks that's the way it was done, and you're not even close. That is not the way it was done. Nobody in the crowd could have gotten close enough. The Roman soldiers would have kept them back away from the crosses. You don't let the public intrude into the immediate execution area. So, any sign that would have been up above him like that would not have been able to be read by the crowd, and therefore he would have had no value. It was traditional for the Romans, when they crucified, to put up signs telling what the criminals had done. So in this case, we've got to look for a different solution. I did something graphically. I took a picture of Golgotha that I had, where the skull face is, and I took the Catholic image of the cross with Christ nailed to it and a little bitty sign over his head, and I made the cross 15 feet high, scale-wise, and Christ 10 feet tall, and I put it up on top of Golgotha there, and there wasn't a tiniest chance that anybody could have read what was on that sign, even with me having made it so much bigger. And it would have been very difficult because those escarpment cliffs are about 60 feet high. It would have taken a long, long detour to go all the way around this huge quarry and come in the backside and climb up the hill to the top of Mount Moriah and then come all the way down to the end, where the skull face is, to crucify. It would have been very awkward, very un-Roman-like. So the Romans had a solution for that, and we're going to get into it shortly. But right now, we got to figure out, well, what's being talked about here? Well, sometimes, again, playing the history detective here, the New Testament was written in Greek, and you got to look at the Greek. John 19:19, and Pilate wrote a title and put it on the cross, and the writing was, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Now, if you check the Greek word for on, that is, he put it on the cross, the Greek word is epine, it means over. He put it over the cross. So the signs were over, that is, on top of or above the cross. Now, how is that possible? Did he put up another post and nail signs to it? No, he didn't. There was a very common way that they did signs all over Jerusalem. They had advertising and billboards, their version of it, just like we do today. Like somebody said, the more things change, the more they say the same. So I want to show you some evidence of what I'm saying here. Let me switch ahead here. I'm going through my slides to using my presentation as notes for this because it's just too much to remember. As it turns out, about 100 feet at the most, 80 to 100 feet from the Garden Tomb, in the cliff face are three cutouts that have been chiseled out. Imagine chiseling out the limestone face about 6 inches deep and big enough to hold a 4x8 piece of plywood. Now do it 3 times and have these kind of in a triangle, almost touching each other. Then you make up signs in 3 languages, and you put a different language sign in each one of those cutouts. 4x8 is enough to make big letters and make it readable from a good distance away. And as it turns out, that's exactly what they did over their crucifixion site. It's a common thing, looking at the cliff faces, and Jerusalem's a very, very rocky place. Every valley has cliff faces, some natural, some quarried, and you'll see these cutouts all over Jerusalem that are 2,000 years old, and once held billboards or signs of some kind advertising something.
You still there?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
I'm just scrolling ahead here. I'm sorry.
Okay. Oh, no. That's all right. I just want to make sure we didn't have audio issues.
Okay. So anyway, it's actually one of our archaeological team members made up 3 of these signs in the 3 different languages, and we got a picture showing them in the cutouts, and they can be read, from over 100 feet away. So there would have been no problem with the crowds being able to read in their language this charge that Pilate had written on the signs. Now, at the time the cutouts were found, it was not known that 43 feet below the ground where the cutouts are is a Roman crucifixion site. We didn't know it. The man that did the digging, Ron Wyatt, did not know. It was later that he figured out what the sign, we call them the sign niches, that they were for the signs that Pilate wrote. And they were used every time there was a crucifixion at this site. Now, please understand that in 70 AD, 69, 70 AD, the Roman army besieged Jerusalem. The Jews fought like crazy. They killed a huge amount of Roman soldiers. And by the time the Roman soldiers finally broke through into the city, they were so angry, so absolutely enraged at the defense that the Jews had put up that had taken so many lives of their buddies, that they were absolutely brutal and merciless in their assault on the Jewish population inside the city. Hundreds of thousands were murdered, killed, civilians, soldiers. Very few were spared. Every single building was leveled, and all the buildings were made of stone. They don't even allow you to build a wood building in Jerusalem to this very day. All the buildings over there today, if they're made of concrete, they have to be faced with stone. That is the building code. Lumber over there costs about 4.5 times more than it does over here. Lumber's hard to get. Stone is the big thing. And they still chisel out these stones. I watched old men hand chiseling stones to face these new buildings in a quarry, and they're using the same kind of tools, hammers, same shapes, everything that they did 2,000 years ago, just the same. Well, anyway, when they leveled this rubble, it covered everything up from anywhere from 40 to 65 feet of rubble. Now covers what's called the Roman level, the level of the city of Jerusalem that existed at the time of Christ and the apostles. So if you're going to find anything from that era and that time period, you have to go down. You have to excavate. You have to dig down. You have to tunnel. And a lot of it's been done. And there are awesome excavations underneath the ground of buildings that have been exposed. And it's absolutely something to see if you know where to go. And anybody that might want to go to Jerusalem and see those things, you ought to get a hold of me privately and let me give you some heads up, some tips on what to see, because you'll never see these things if you take a standard tour. But I can tell you where to go to go down below the ground and see things that will just stun you and amaze you about the history of Jerusalem. Well, anyway, there was 43 feet of rubble on top of the garden tomb area. The garden tomb itself was buried, and James China Gordon found the garden tomb and excavated out immediately around it, exposing it for the first time in who knows, well, since 70 A.D. So, excuse me, I'm going to grab a drink of water real quick. When Ron Wyatt dug down, he's digging straight down against the escarpment, the cliff face of Mount Moriah there. And he finds a hole in the cliff. And it opens into a tunnel that's shaped like an upside down L. He goes horizontally in, then he has to go down vertically. And he ends up down at the Roman level by doing this in a room, a cave room. And there's kind of a crevice, which indicates access back outside the escarpment at that level. And so he digs that way, and he has to bring the rubble inside that room, and then it has to be hauled up through this vertical shaft in buckets by volunteers. Many, many tons of rubble had to be dug out. But when he broke through to the outside at that level, he was on the Roman level, and we know this because there was a boulder right in front of him, and it had a small boulder on top of it. And when he lifted the small boulder, something you could pick up with both hands, there was a Roman coin under it, and it had the Emperor Tiberius's pictures, and the Emperor Tiberius was the Roman emperor at the time that Christ was crucified. So there was proof. And right beyond that, he found, as he excavated, a Roman crucifixion site that had 4 cross holes carved into 2 rock shelves. The lower shelf had 3 holes, approximately 11 inches square, 22 to 24 inches deep. The top level or shelf that was about 8 feet above those had 1 single cross hole. The way the Romans worked, if there were multiple crucifixions taking place, the most important person being crucified would have been done so. They would have done so on that top shelf in that 1 hole. So we're pretty sure that is exactly where Jesus Christ was crucified.
Wow, that's amazing.
I had my hands in the hole at the time that we found it. Only about 8 inches of it. It was still full of rubble and dirt. And we'd only dug out about 8 inches of it. And it was like an electric shock went through my body. I'm not saying it was a supernatural thing. It was just an emotional response on my part.
Right.
But, it caught me by surprise. Anyway, I don't want to get maudlin sentimental over that, but I'm just telling you what we had happen here. So we have a Roman crucifixion site. Now the question is, why? Why did they put it so close? At that location. Why would they pick that site? Well, it's near the crossroads of two important roads. One goes to Damascus and one goes to the town of Nablus or Shechem, as it's called in the Bible. Now, but that wasn't the reason why the Romans actually chose that spot for their crucifixion site. As our team tunneled down, and I was not part of the underground team. I was actually on top running the sifting crew. I had 9 people working under me. We had to sift every bucket of dirt and rock that came out of there. We had to sift it through 3 different sized screens to please the Israeli archaeologists. So I learned a lot about archaeological projects. And my wife spent a lot of her time with a toothbrush scrubbing the dirt off of pottery shards. But anyway, I did get to go down the digs, and that's when I got to actually see the cross hole, and as much of it as they had excavated at the time. I have pictures of it totally excavated now.
Hey, Dorian, I'm sorry,
yes.
We have a real quick question. What year was this project? It was multiple years, correct?
Okay, there was two time periods. The first discovery took place. The first discovery took place about 1980 of the crucifixion site by Ron Wyatt. We went back in 1989. His digs were closed, and we went back in 2005 and reopened them and went down and excavated more.
Okay.
But 60 feet down the cliff face towards the corner that turns towards the skull face, we're going in the direction away from the garden tomb, but 60 feet further in that direction, we found a stoning cave, or Ron Wyatt found a stoning cave, And it was a cave that at once went farther back in, but somebody had walled up the back part of it. So it was like a giant room, about 30 feet wide and about 20 feet deep and about 8 or 9 feet high. And on the floor of that room were human bones and rocks about the size of grapefruits.
Oh, wow.
So,
smoking gun.
What we found was a stoning cave. The Jews, their public executions were by stoning. That's very clearly revealed in Scripture. This looks like where they did their public executions and probably where the martyr Stephen died. The famous martyr in the Bible, Stephen, he probably died here. Although his bones would not have been in there because his friends would have taken his body. The other Christians would have taken his body and buried it. But apparently some of the criminals didn't have any friends or whatever, and their bones were just left in there. So stop and think. This is already a public execution site and has been so for hundreds of years. And along come the Romans, the way they thought was, well, hey, everybody's used to coming here to see public executions. That's where we'll have ours, except we're going to do ours by crucifixion rather than stoning, because that's the Roman way. So you see how the evidence begins to build more and more in favor of this being where we want to focus, as opposed to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Clue number 5, Matthew 27:50 through 52. And Jesus, when he cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost, and behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks were rent. So wherever Christ was crucified, we should find evidence of earthquake-related cracks in the surrounding rock faces and cliffs. There are earthquake cracks underneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and they're all over Golgotha and this area that I've just been telling you about. I've got pictures of multiple earthquake cracks. So that clue could apply to both. But the regular crucifixion site, there is no evidence of a crucifixion site beyond this little earthquake crack crevice that might have held one cross with a lot of braces on it at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Scrolling ahead now to the next clue. Hang on. Oops, I jumped some clues here. Got to back up. Okay, now we're gonna look at three clues here pretty quick. We're clues number 6, 7, and 8. First one, Matthew 27, 57 through 60. When the even was come, there came a rich man of Arimathea named Joseph, who also himself was Jesus' disciple. Disciple means student, by the way. So he went to Pilate and he begged the body of Jesus. Then Pilate commanded the body to be delivered. And when Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out in the rock. Okay, so we know that the tomb was the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, that he is the man who created and built this tomb. And it was not a tomb constructed out of stone blocks. It was hewn out in the rock. And the Greek word translation back that up. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Joseph of Arimathea you may have never heard. Why did Pilate so readily give Joseph of Arimathea the body of Christ? Joseph of Arimathea was a Roman citizen. And not only that, he was a Roman decurion. Joseph of Arimathea was in charge of all the tin production in the Roman Empire. And the place in that day where the richest tin deposits were found was in what is now England at a place called Glastonbury. For the last 60, 70 years, there have been rumors that Jesus Christ was supposedly seen in Glastonbury, England. Well, we have no record of Jesus Christ's life between age 20 and 30. It is very, very likely that he traveled with his uncle. That's who Joseph of Arimathea was Jesus' uncle. And that he traveled with him in his duties as a Roman decurion, and that would have brought him to Glastonbury. So the rumors and the stories that have come out of that part of England very well could have some fact in them. I think it's fascinating. And by the way, the reason why Jesus traveled with Joseph of Arimathea between 20 and 30, why wasn't he out preaching and teaching and healing and doing all of this stuff? A man could not be a priest or a minister in Israel until he was 30 years old. That was the minimum age. So Jesus had to wait until he was 30 to begin his ministry. Maybe a whole lot of our churches ought to take a lesson from that and not be too quick. I watched a 17-year-old ordained as a minister in a particular denomination I won't mention. I was there giving a presentation, and they ordained this young man, and he was just, I think his head swelled to about 5 times normal size. He was eaten up with the vanity and convinced that he was going to go out and save the world. And I felt sorry for the young man. It wasn't his fault. But somewhere along the line, that denomination chose to ignore the scripture that says you do not ordain a novice. So anyway, you can see why that Jesus waited till he was 30. And so he died about age 33 and a half. Okay, now, so Joseph gets the body and he lays it in his own tomb, which he'd hewn out in the rock. So the tomb where Jesus, we know where Jesus was crucified, but we need to know where he was laid. Well, he was laid in a tomb hewn out of the rock. In no way, shape, or fashion is the tomb inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre hewn out of the rock. It is made out of cut blocks. Does not agree with the scriptural clue. Clue number 7, John 19, 41 through 42. Now in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new sepulchre, where never man yet laid. Now you have to understand something. You go over there today, and the Garden Tomb Association is actually part of the Anglican or the Church of England. This is one of the few so-called holy sites that the Catholics don't own or control over there. And they have made a very beautiful garden full of flowers, exotic plants, and trees. That is not the kind of garden that was there. That's not what the Bible is talking about. It's talking about a working garden, a garden that had fruit trees and olive trees and grapevines. That's the kind of a garden it was. How do we know there was ever that kind of a garden where the Garden Tomb is? Archaeological excavation proved it. When they dug down near the Garden Tomb, they found, one of the first things they found at the Roman level was a wine press. You don't have a wine press there for grapes that are being grown miles away. You put your wine press where the grapes are so you can get them into the wine press and turn them into what's called new wine. It was a very fast process when they harvested. So we have the evidence that there was a garden there at the time. Now, there is absolutely not one shred of evidence that there was ever a garden of any kind where the Church of the Holy Sepulchre sat, because that was right on the edge of the Valley of Hinnom at the time that Christ died. And the Valley of Hinnom was a garbage dump. They even threw the bodies of condemned criminals who'd been executed in there, and there were fires burning, and it stunk. And it's not the place you're going to try to raise olives and fruit trees and grapes. Now we come to clue number 8. And that's tied in with clue number 7. Back in John 19, we talked about where never man was yet laid. And then the next verse says, there laid they Jesus, therefore, because of the Jews' preparation day. Let me explain a little bit about the preparation day. There's 2 kinds of preparations days. The Jews, of course, observed the 7th-day Sabbath. So Friday, the 6th day, was the preparation day for the Sabbath. Since you couldn't do business, you couldn't work on the Sabbath, then you got everything done. You're cooking for the Sabbath. The women got the cooking done, so there would be plenty of food on the Sabbath without having to do all that cooking, because that was the woman's normal work. And so she had to take that day off. So it kept the women from having to work 7 days a week, so to speak. Now, there's another kind of preparation day. That was, the Jews had 7 different annual Sabbaths or holy days. And the day before each one of those days, since no work was done on those annual Sabbaths, those were preparation days also. So what this tells us is that was the preparation day, the very next day, and the Jewish days began at sundown and ended at sundown. So sundown on the day that Jesus died would begin a holy day. And Jewish law wouldn't allow them to handle dead bodies or to do burials on a holy day. They had to get him in the tomb quickly. And there are certain preparations they did. They put certain spices and things on the body and so on. Not like an Egyptian embalming or anything, but there were things that had to be rushed and done. And it says, verse 8, the sepulcher was near at hand. Near at hand. So there's a very, very strong clue. The sepulcher had to be very, very close to where Jesus died. So this could be done quickly. And lo and behold, the Roman crucifixion site turns out to be less than 100 feet from the garden tomb. You see how all of these clues in the scriptures begin to paint a picture.
Absolutely.
Okay, now we're at clue. Looking for clue number 9 here, just a moment. Here we go. Oh, this is a good one. This is a very, very good one. Clue number 9, Matthew 6:60. Okay, it says the body was laid in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out in the rock, and he rolled a great stone to the door of the sepulcher. Now, this is not like a round boulder. This is like think of a stone wheel, a giant stone wheel. And this wasn't just a normal tombstone, if you please, rolling stone. This says it was a great stone. So it's the Greek word means it was huge. Now, these rolling doors that seal tombs in Israel are pretty common, and they've been found all over the nation. The biggest one that's ever been found to date was 10 feet in diameter, about a foot thick. I saw it. There's one, I saw Herod's family tomb, and the one I saw there was only 5 feet in diameter and about a foot thick. In front of the garden tomb is a stone trough carved right out of the actual stone, and the sides of the bottom of it slant at about a 45-degree angle. And the giant stone, this great stone talked about here in Matthew 60, rolled in that big long trough, which is about 25 feet long, and they only rolled one direction. In other words, I mean, you could. All right, I'm stumbling for words here. I'll get it in a second. If you go to the right, when you roll the stone in front of the tomb door, you have to roll it from the left to the right. And when it gets in front of the tomb door, it is up against a rock bumper that's shaped just like the stone. It's curved, so the stone fits right into it. And all the indications are that stone was 13 feet 2 inches in diameter. It would have been, if it were discovered, it would be the biggest tomb door ever discovered in Israel. Now, that is indeed a sign that it's a rich man's tomb. Remember, Joseph of Arimathea, we're told plainly, was a rich man. This is a rich man's tomb. It's not like everybody else's tomb. So this is one of the ways it was a rich man's tomb. This was a status symbol. It reflected, wealth and positions in society. And by the way, there are 2 carved stone beds in that tomb. And one of them, at some point, was enlarged almost a foot. And that is speculated. And again, this is speculation that Christ was much taller than Joseph of Arimathea, and that originally this 2 stone beds had been cut for Joseph and his wife. But when it became clear and Christ would have explained to Joseph of Arimathea in advance that he needed to use his tomb, then Joseph of Arimathea would have caused that tomb or that stone bed to be enlarged so it would take Christ's body. Anyway, we don't know that for sure, but it kind of fits into the pattern, if you know what I mean. And see, things like that, before they become fact, they have to come into existence in your mind as a possibility. And then you go looking to see, can I find evidence to verify this or not? That's what the history detective does. Okay, well, we know where the door is. Ron Wyatt found the door when he excavated below the lower shelf that had the cross holes in it. He uncovered just enough of the edge to where he could use a mathematical calculation to determine the width, 13'2". And when we superimpose to scale on a picture of the garden tomb, we take draw a circle to scale 13'2" and put it in front of that door. It fits perfectly. But there's a problem with just rolling this giant door into place. Somebody could come along, overpower the guards, and pry the door open and steal Christ's body and then claim that he had arisen. And by the way, at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, there is absolutely no evidence that there was ever a big stone sealing that tomb. It's just not designed for that. Hang on while I'm scrolling here.
We're good. We're good.
Okay.
This is good stuff.
There is I have a bombshell to drop on you folks about what we found at the garden tomb that relates to this door. But I need to read clue number 10 to you. This is in Matthew 27. We're going to be covering 62 through 66. Now, the next day that followed the day of the preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees came together to Pilate saying, "Sir, we remember that the deceiver said, while he was yet alive, after 3 days I will rise again. Command, therefore, that the sepulchre be made sure until the third day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away and say to the people, he is risen from the dead. So the last error shall be worse than the first." Pilate said unto them, "You have a watch." In other words, you have a watch was, I think, 4 Roman soldiers. You have a watch, go your way, make it as sure as you can. Well, they did. The Roman soldiers did the work, as it turns out. It says, verse 66, so they went and they made the sepulchre sure, sealing the stone and setting a watch with the Roman soldiers given them by Pilate. How did they seal this stone to prevent its being opened? How would they seal this stone? Is there any evidence, hard evidence, to be seen at the garden tomb of this sealing work today? There's certainly no evidence at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, but the answer is yes. There is an incredible piece of evidence, and I am excited to reveal it to you because I was there when it was found. I didn't find it, but I was right there, and I saw it up close and personal. So let me get into this, Mike, and you'll see why I was excited about this program.
Oh, great.
Let me tell you how they sealed the door. Remember, this big door runs in a keystone trough, not just a rectangular trough, but one with slanted sides, which means the stone itself was tapered on both sides. And once it's in that slot, it would have been very, very hard to push it out of that slot because the slot is about a foot high. It's not shallow. Now, all you have to do, and what the Romans did to seal a stone, they took most of you guys have ever done any work know what a star drill is. It's a long piece of metal, and it has 4 or 5 flutes at the one end that are sharpened on the edges that resembles a 5-pointed star. And you pound on the other end in rock, and you rotate it as you pound, and it will make a hole in the rock. Well, that's what they did. They made a great big old diameter hole, about 2 inches in diameter, deep into the rock. And when they got it ready, one on each side, actually, we think, they poured hot lead into it. And then very quickly, before the lead could harden up, they took a big, strong metal stake and slammed that thing into the lead with a big sledgehammer and drove it all the way in, and the lead hardened around it. And once that was done, it was near impossible to get that big steel bar or iron bar out of that cliff face. It sealed. It was right up against the edge of the seal stone, and it was high. It was about actually right above your eyes. It would have been about 6.5, 7 foot. So that means there wasn't any chance of prying that stone up and rolling it over top of that bar. It just couldn't be done. The physics of it wouldn't allow it. Now, what you did at the same time, I forgot to mention, that bar had like a big giant nail head on it, if you can imagine. And there was a chain. That bar had been put through a big link of a chain. Then it was driven into the cliff face in the lead. And then they did the same thing on the other side, and the chain stretched across the whole front of the door, which means now it could not be pried outward from the top. It can't be pried in any direction. It can't be moved. So that's as sure as they could make it at that time in history with the technology. Now, let me read you something. A scripture in Matthew 28, verse 1 and 2. In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the week, so early morning on what we would call Sunday, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. And behold, there was a great earthquake. For the angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat on it. Now, stop and think a minute. Christ, if he was Christ and resurrected, he could walk right through that door. He didn't need to have that door opened. Why did an angel come and literally fling this door back? Do you realize the power, the sheer power it would take to do that? If it happened, if this is a true historical event, think a minute. What would happen to that big steel bar when that door was slammed back against it? I mean, it was already touching it, and the angel just takes the door with irresistible power, shoves it back to the left, and the bar is there. What has to happen to the bar?
Hey, Dorian, real quick, I want to say, Mark said I would have to see a photo of what Dorian is describing to understand the bar and the chain. I'm with him. I'm not quite getting a visual. Can you describe that a little bit better for us?
Okay, yeah. All right.
Now the stone you're talking about would look like a big grinding stone from a mill, from what I'm gathering.
You're absolutely right, except without the hole in the hole in the middle.
Right, no hole in the middle.
No, it's a giant stone disc.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes on the rolling tomb doors, it would have a flat spot on one side, and when it was rolled back in front of the tomb, that flat spot would lodge, right immediately in front of the tomb opening, and that would make it harder to roll too. But I don't think this one does. The stone has not ever been fully excavated. It's still down there, right in front of the crucifixion site. There's evidence that after the Romans had left the area, that the early Christians may have used that site like a shrine and had a church there. And that may be how the big stone door ended up inside, would have been inside the building. We don't know for sure. But there are archaeological clues that might have been the case. All right, so you're looking at this big round disc in front of the tomb door. All right, think of the 10 o'clock position on a clock. You with me?
Yep.
All right, that's where you're going to make your hole in the cliff face, right against the edge of the stone.
Okay.
And you drive your stake in there.
So the stone can't be pushed to the side. Okay, I got that. Let me ask, and keep explaining, but I get that. What about, why can't it come out? Like fall forward?
Okay, and I'll answer that. You come down at about the 5 o'clock position, and you put another stake in right against the edge of the door.
Okay.
But when you drove the stakes in, they were already through the ends of a chain, the last link in a big chain. So now that they're embedded in the cliff face and the hot lead is hardened, the chain is stretched between the two bars,
Okay.
and it prevents the tomb door from being pried outward.
I'm with you now. Got it.
Okay. All righty. Are we good?
Yeah, I got it. I think. Yep. Okay, we got it. Yep.
Okay. All right. Now, so we're faced with conclusion that now we're seeing a supernatural event described here. So the supernatural event had to operate with the laws of physics. The door could not have been thrown back without the iron bar being sheared off of the cliff face. Mm-hmm. Not pulled out, sheared off. Are you with me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, it can't go side to side without it shearing that bar.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we found the remnants of the iron bar and the hole that was made with a star drill, right where it should be, at the 10 o'clock position. We got permission from the Garden Tomb to drill out some filings of the metals. Okay. We could see what looked like two different metals, one very thin around the edge and then the big piece of bar in the middle. So we drilled out and got filings from both metals, and we took them to Hebrew University. They have a spectrographic analysis lab where they can analyze metals. We did not tell them where this came from. We asked them to analyze the metal filings and tell us what we had. The official report, which is a matter of public record, was that what we had was a mixture of lead and iron from the Roman period.
Hmm.
And I have pictures in my presentation taken up close of this sheared off iron bar. People tried to say, until we got that analysis, the skeptics said, oh, no, this is a piece of shrapnel from the wars. Baloney.
Right.
Baloney. This is in a drilled out hole. This is not a hole made. You know, Mike, I've walked around the Alamo down there in Texas where you are. I walked around the Alamo and looked carefully at the rocks that make up the outer wall, because they are the same rocks that were there when the Alamo was captured and destroyed. And you will see pieces of iron shrapnel from exploding cannonballs still sticking in that white rock. You'll see rusty places, and you get up close, you'll find a piece of iron shrapnel embedded in that white rock. And you will never find a nice round hole, that is sticking in. Anyway, I'm looking at the picture right now, and like I said, it's dramatic. It was certainly compelling to me. And I think it's and the funny thing is, tens of thousands of people troop in and out of the door, which is about 5 feet to the right. They troop in and out of that tomb all year long, and they never notice this hole in the cliff just above their head with this big chunk of sheared off iron bar sticking out.
Now, you said that to get down to that time, it's like 30 foot, right?
Well, not on the Garden Tomb, no.
Okay. That's where I was confused.
And no, you're bringing up a good point, and I failed to make this clear. The ground, the Garden Tomb, where the ground is much higher, and it slants. So by the time you get to the crucifixion site, 100 feet away, you are 43 feet lower.
Okay.
If you take the bottom of the door of the Garden Tomb, you're going to go 43 feet down in the next 100 feet, because that's the natural way the rock slopes on that part of Mount Moriah.
Okay. Well, what I was getting at, I thought we were talking about it being deep, and I thought, well, that wouldn't be shrapnel then if it was, but okay, I got you. And then I was going to ask, well, if it could be, then did all this rubble come about from the World Wars or what? I was a little confused. I got you now.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, no, the rubble's not from the modern wars. The modern wars, you can go over and look at the old walls of Jerusalem around, say, the Jaffa Gate, and you'll see the machine gun bullet pockmarks in the stone. That's modern, But here's the thing: in this whole cliff face wall, all around the Garden Tomb, you will not find another piece of metal like this anywhere. Only in this spot, you see.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why that the lower stake on the right, where there's no evidence, is because that part of the tomb down there got damaged by vandals at some point, and they put in new stone. So the evidence was carried off in the rock, in the old rock. You can see that the stone construction, just look at a picture of the Garden Tomb entrance, and you'll see stone block construction just to the right. And that was just simply, like I said, that's replacement. That's modern. Not sure exactly of when that damage occurred, but the damage was there when they excavated the Garden Tomb. It had been there probably since the time of the Roman occupation, or destruction of Jerusalem.
Oh yeah, I see it. That's clearly different there.
Right. So that brings us to clue number 11. Isaiah 53, 8 and 9, this was a prophecy of Christ. He was taken from prison and from judgment, and who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken. And here it is. And he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death. Okay, so if this is the tomb where Christ was laid, then it has to be in conjunction with the graves of both the rich and the wicked. And yet, when you look at the Garden Tomb, that's the only tomb in the garden. There are no other graves. Is this a flaw in our research? Is this the fly in the ointment? Is this the one that makes the whole thing fall apart? Nope. Mike, I'm not sure what picture you're looking at of the Garden Tomb door. Is it big enough to where you could see sort of an alcove way over on the left side?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that alcove is sealed up with kind of natural-looking rock. That once was the entrance. Are you ready for this?
Okay.
That once was the entrance into the catacombs where the rich were buried. They're right there. I've been in those catacombs. I've seen the back of that wall you're looking at. The graves of the rich are right there, that close to the Garden Tomb. Now, we found a very, very amazing anomaly. Next to the Garden Tomb is a 10-acre piece of property, which is supposedly a Catholic basilica. And yet, when you walk in the front gate, we got permission, the gardener got us permission from the people who, they're supposedly Catholic priests there, to visit the catacomb. So we troop in there, and the first thing I see all over above the front door and on a big column right in front of the front door are the Knights Templar logo of the four-sided cross with equal sides, what they call the Iron Cross or the Rosy Cross. And it tells me right away that this is not a Catholic facility, that this is the Knights Templar facility. And strangely, the guys that we saw there, they were all 7 feet tall, and they really were strange people. They wouldn't talk to us, wouldn't even look at us. We went back to the catacombs, though, and we saw the graves of the rich, and I have pictures of them, and they're in the, all this is in the presentation that I photographically. But we found an anomaly in the graves of the rich. We found thousands of loose bones in rooms in the catacombs that were not connected to any specific body. They were just thousands of loose bones. And this is not the way they buried the rich. This is a serious anomaly. So we got to do some history detective work. We need to know why all these bones of nameless people, thousands of them, could represent thousands of people. We were only allowed to go see one level of the catacombs, and there were metal grates that you could see through in the floor, and I could see 2 more metal grates. There were at least 2 more levels below us that we didn't even get to. So if we saw these thousands of bones that represented hundreds, if not thousands of bodies, what are they doing there? There's no place you can go to look it up historically. So we got to figure it out. Well, it turns out that underneath the old city of Jerusalem is a giant cave. It's called Zedekiah's Cave or Solomon's Quarries. It was first called Solomon's Quarries because all the stone for the first temple was quarried out of this giant natural cave. I've been in this cave. I've been all through it. It has 2 levels. It's a mile long. It has a ceiling 60 foot high in many places. There's rooms where you could park a fleet of semis. And this is all underneath the old city of Jerusalem. When I say the old city, I'm talking about the part that's behind the big defensive walls. And that cave extends from the edge of the escarpment, the quarry, by Golgotha, all the way underneath where the Temple Mount would have been. Well, it turns out that when Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem, King Nebuchadnezzar, he built a siege wall all the way around the city. He took rock and built a second wall. They had a wall, now he had a wall. And everything in between those 2 walls was the valley of death. It was no man's land. You got caught out there, you died. So the Jews had a problem. They were suffering thousands of casualties every day from the big giant stones that Nebuchadnezzar's catapults are flinging, and the spears and arrows by the, that darkened the sky. They were suffering a lot of deaths every day, and they could not get to their regular burying places without dying. They couldn't go outside the city walls. And Jewish law said a dead body had to be out of the city by sundown. What they did was they constructed a secret tunnel all the way from Zedekiah's Cave to the catacombs of the rich. And the people that were killed were taken through that tunnel and just stacked like cordwood in those catacombs. It was a act of desperation. And that's where these thousands of bones came from. So the mystery was solved. Now, God in the Bible had sent Jeremiah to preach to the city of Jerusalem and tell them to repent of their sins and their pagan worship and stuff, and that if they would not fight Nebuchadnezzar but surrender to him, their captivity would be short, and their city and their temple and their old men and their pregnant women and all these other things would be spared. But they didn't take the way of escape offered them. They resisted Nebuchadnezzar to the end, and so terrible things happened. The city of Jerusalem was destroyed. The temple was destroyed. The old men were murdered. The women and children were ripped up, and just terrible things. King Zedekiah ignored Jeremiah's messages from God to surrender, and he fled through Zedekiah's cave through a secret tunnel that went all the way down from the city of Jerusalem down into the Jordan Valley and came out near the old city of Jericho. And he got caught in the plains of the Jordan Valley by Nebuchadnezzar's cavalry. And he was brought back, and his two sons were brought before him, and they were killed in front of him. And then they took hot irons and they bored his eyes out. And then he was stripped naked and marched back to Babylon in humiliation. There's a little bit of history on that. Anyway, we now have both the rich and the wicked in very, very close proximity to the Garden Tomb. So we've covered these 12 clues, and I want to go back and just a little bit of review of them. Just a minute, I'm scrolling through. Oh, you know what? We haven't covered the 12th clue. Let's do the 12th clue.
Okay.
This one's another bombshell. Yeah, we don't want to neglect this. For your Bible students out there, they'll remember that Abraham had a son named Isaac that was born to his wife Sarah when she was in her 90s, according to the Bible. Well, the boy was about 12 years old, I believe, and Abraham got a message from God to take him to the mountains of Moriah, to a mountain that I will show you, and sacrifice him. Well, the story goes, it took several days for Abraham to get there. Now, this is a long, long time before the Christ would die on Mount Moriah, you understand?
Mm-hmm.
And yet Abraham's being sent to Mount Moriah, to a particular mountain. Why didn't God just tell him, go over to that first mountain you see over there and sacrifice your son? He was sending him to the place where his own son would die so many years later. And Abraham being told to sacrifice his only son is a type of God the Father sacrificing his only son. But here's what we want to look at. We want to look at one of the physical things here. So we know that Abraham came to Mount Moriah. It's in Genesis 22:9. They came to the place which God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar there. And he laid the wood in order, and he bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. Now, the altar wasn't built out of wood. The wood for the burnt sacrifice, and again, they did not burn, it would, obviously, if you know your Bible, God tells Abraham to stop just before he kills Isaac. And Abraham gets the title Father of the Faithful because he trusted God. Well, anyway, we have this altar and we have the wood because the sacrifice wasn't burned until it was killed. And what was this altar made of? There's only two things that an altar to God in the Bible could be made of. Two things. It's found, the instructions are found in Exodus 20, verse 24. An altar of earth shall you make unto me. And he talks about the sacrifice. And then he says in verse 25, excuse me, And if you will make me an altar of stone, you shall not build it of hewn stone. So an altar to God could have been of earth or it could have been of stone, but it had to be natural stone that had never had a tool upon it. The rest of that verse says, for if you lift up your tool upon it, you have polluted or defiled it. Remember the thin soil on Mount Moriah, so no earth altar could have been built there. So therefore, Abraham's altar that he built to sacrifice Isaac on had to be built out of stone. Now, here's a big question. Was there ever an altar of non-hewn stone on top of Golgotha directly above the Roman crucifixion site? And the answer is yes, there was. I found a picture from 1880. I've got it here on the screen looking at it. It shows an altar built out of unhewn stone right above the spot where the Roman crucifixion site was. I got excited because I had taken pictures of the top of Golgotha standing on the top of the old wall of the city of Jerusalem. So I dug out that picture, and it was so far away, and I thought, oh, man, when I start to blow this up, it's going to blur. It's just going to be a big blur, because when you enlarge very small things in pictures, they tend to blur out on you. So I enlarged it 100%. It didn't blur. Oh, great. I enlarged it 100% over that. It didn't blur. I enlarged it 100% over that. It didn't blur. And lo and behold, right there in plain sight, I'm looking at it in my picture, is that same altar made out of stone still there. Now, I can't prove to anyone that that's Abraham's altar. But don't you find that a very, very amazing thing that there would be an altar of unhewn stone right above where the Roman crucifixion site was found?
Right. It's incredible.
Absolutely. So there's your 12th clue. I want to review them now real quick, and we'll wrap this up. We can take any questions anybody has. Clue number 1, site outside the city walls. It's a yes for both of the sites, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the Garden Tomb. Clue number 2, regular Roman crucifixion site. No for the Holy Sepulchre, yes for the Garden Tomb. Site is the place of a skull. No for the Holy Sepulchre, yes for the Garden Tomb. Evidence of signs at the site. No for the Holy Sepulchre, yes for the Garden Tomb. Earthquake cracks. Yes for the Holy Sepulchre, yes for the Garden Tomb. Rich man's tomb hewn? No for the Holy Sepulchre, yes for the Garden Tomb. Tomb in a garden? No for the Holy Sepulchre, yes for the Garden Tomb. Tomb near a crucifixion site? No for the Holy Sepulchre, yes for the Garden Tomb. Great door seal stone? No for the Holy Sepulchre, yes for the Garden Tomb. Rich and the wicked near? No for the Holy Sepulchre, yes for the Garden Tomb. Probable or possible Abraham's altar? No for the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, yes for the Garden Tomb. So basically, the Golgotha and the Garden Tomb site fulfills all 12 clues that I presented to you. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre has only fulfills 2 of them.
Incredible.
And that, dear friends, is this presentation on biblical archaeology.
That was, again, amazing, Dorian. Absolutely incredible. So,
I'm still amazed myself.
I can't imagine, like, when you were talking, I was just imagining what it would be like to be in there. So, if anybody has any questions, you can, of course, you can jump in chat and ask away. But also, if you would like to call in, we'll hang out for a few minutes, see if anybody's got any questions, see if anybody wants to call in and ask questions to Dorian. The number is 682-459-2977. Again, that is 682-459-2977. 2977. If you got questions to ask him, jump in. You can do it in chat. You can give us a call real quick. We'll take your call and ask questions. Chat went dead, Dorian. I think everybody has to let all that sink in first.
I understand. Believe me.
It's so funny when we have you on. Chat is dead, and people just listen. Like I listen, and you, like I said, when you get done, no matter what subject we're on, I am spent. You literally wear me out with so much good information, and I mean that in a really good way. I promise, but it's just like, wow. When was the last time you were in Jerusalem, and do you plan to go back?
Yeah, October 2013.
Okay, you planning on going back?
I do think I'll probably go back at least once more.
Okay.
We have, the thing is, we have a lot of exploration that remains to be done. The ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah that I was in 5 times, there's a lot of exploration needs to be done there. It's going to have to be done by younger guys. We old geezers we're just running out of steam. Our heart's still there. I still feel like I'm about 45 mentally, but man, the old body just, it doesn't stand up to travel and the rigors. Because you go to Sodom and Gomorrah, if you're lucky on a cool day, it's 100 degrees.
Oh, yikes.
And there is no shade. You explore for 2 hours and you feel like a big vacuum cleaner sucked everything out of you, but but just enough life to still be alive. And you got to come out of the ruins and go take a cold shower, and get some refreshment, because boy, it really does. It's a very dry heat. There's no humidity to speak of, but wow,
Mike asked a question. What kind of restrictions are there when doing archaeology there? I am guessing tons.
There are. Okay, now I'm not up to date on any changes that have been made in the last, say, 5 years. I don't think any have been made, but it would be up to anybody going over there to be sure and check. You cannot excavate. That means if you see part of an old Roman jar sticking out of the ground and you take out your pocket knife and dig 6 inches, you've broken Israeli law.
Okay.
So you cannot excavate without a permit from the Israeli Antiquities Authority under any circumstances. Now, you will find this interesting. The Palestinians are smuggling in metal detectors by the hundreds, which are not allowed in Israel. And they are really doing a number on the Israelis' archaeological sites, looking for Roman gold jewelry and coins and things, and they're finding.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, I can imagine. Probably unreal.
Yeah, that's a situation that the Israelis, especially in the sections that are pretty much under the control of the Palestinians, the Israelis can't stop the looting of the sites. What I was told by a professional Israeli archaeologist was that you can surface collect, but you can't dig. So when I found my 2,000-year-old Islamic coin in the Roman dump by eyeballing, it was on the surface, so
Right.
I was able to bring it back. So.
That's cool. Very cool. Okay, do we have any other questions? Anybody want to call in? I can put the number out there one more time, and we'll see if anybody wants to call in.
Mike, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
One little detail. Even if you want to do a professional archaeological excavation, it takes 2 to 5 years usually to get approval on it from the Israeli Antiquities Authority.
Wow, that's incredible. That's crazy. Why is it? Because there's so many people wanting to do it, or is it just red tape to sift through, or why does it take so long?
Let me think how to answer that. I think we'll just say that this is how it looks from my perspective. Okay.
Okay.
I got through a man, a friend over there who had high political connections. I got a private tour of the Israeli Antiquities Authority's what they call labs, where they work on the most valuable and rare stuff they find.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw $20 million, and this was 2010 bucks value. I saw $20 million worth of rare Roman gold jewelry, bracelets, earrings, elaborate necklaces, and rare gold coins being cleaned with dental tools in their labs by an army of technicians. And I know, my impression is, and my personal feeling is, that none of that will ever show up in a museum over there.
Really? What do you think will happen to it?
I think, like with any government on the face of the earth, there is corruption, and I believe that it will be sold off privately to wealthy collectors around the world.
I see. That's what I was wondering. That's what I was wondering if you were getting to. Wow. Mike's got another good question I like, because I doing the UK podcast. I definitely get where he's going with this. What do they call old there?
Oh yeah, right. That reminds me, Mike, of my first time in Scotland. I was amazed. I hooked up with Sandy Lyon, that was the head of the Scottish Melody Technical Association, and Sandy told me that they considered coins that were 400 years old new money.
Right.
Well, I was thrilled to dig coins 400 years old, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Coming from the United States. What do they call old? They are primarily interested. They're not interested in anything that I could see from the 20th century, or really much interested in anything from the 18th century. There might be some. I mean, they do have some artifacts preserved from some of the various wars, the 1948 war, when the Jews came back to Palestine and that type of thing. They have some. They made up their own armored vehicles. They call them sandwich trucks, and they got some of those preserved. Some blown up tanks and things. You see that stuff around the country from some of the modern wars, but they don't seem to be really interested. The only reason they don't want you hunting modern war relics is because there's so many landmines and explosives and things where, they don't want the tourists getting blown up.
Yeah, right.
We were, because the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah are not officially acknowledged, we were allowed to go in and we could do whatever we wanted in there. We could excavate, because it wasn't considered an archaeological site.
Yeah.
So we were able to bring back partially burned balls of sulfur, proving that burning sulfur had once rained down on that city, and I found some flint artifacts. Found a flint drill very similar to our Native American drills that we find in the fields here in Kentucky.
That's neat. Very neat. Very interesting. Dorian, let's go ahead and wrap it up. Steph's texting me. She needs me. We got some stuff going on, but
okay.
Oh, okay. So thank you all for tuning in, and I know you all enjoyed Dorian, and many of you have reached out to me and let me know, and we sure appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and have a good night.